stay with that subject. The report of the expert group on abortion due to be published tomorrow after it has been discussed by the Cabinet. But as we heard earlier from Brian Dowling, the report is expected to recommend legislation for limited abortion coupled with regulations. Caroline Simons is legal advisor to the Pro-Life campaign and she's on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Rachel.
From what you know of this report, and I appreciate that you are relying on leaks to the media, what's your response?
Like Micheál Martin has said, and like Timmy Dooley said last night on the television, it's unfortunate that there seems to be so much discussion on the and in the newspapers in relation to a report which none of the other public representatives or none of the public have yet seen. So, I've read Pat Leahy in yesterday's Sunday Business Post and other journalists in the other Sunday newspapers, and I see that there are a range of options which are to be discussed. I, like Micheál Martin, would like to see the specificity of the report and, the different nuances and discussions of the various options in it. And I really think it's premature for us to be discussing it, Rachel, until we all have a copy of the report to look at.
Yet from what we've been told, from what we've read and heard over the past few days, the report is very negative about the option which does not require legislation. In other words, it seems to be coming down on the side of legislation in this area. What's your response to that?
And yet I see different language used in relation to that. I mean, it is acknowledged by most of the journalists in their reporting that the court has accepted that Ireland is entitled to protect the right to life of the mother and of the unborn in the Constitution, and the court has acknowledged that the Supreme Court said 20 years ago that there were circumstances in which interventions in pregnancy were permitted in order to save a mother's life, while always making every effort that was practicable to save the baby's life as well. And acknowledging that, they say that there is some uncertainty as to when a woman might know that she comes within this category. In particular, in the ABC case, they noted that Ms. C didn't consult a doctor and consulted Google and wasn't able to find out whether or not she fell within the parameters of the case.
This is one of the cases, just for clarity on this, that was one of the cases which went before the European Court of Human Rights.
Which has given rise to all of this discussion, absolutely. And the European Court of Human Rights has said, they are not in a position to tell the Irish government in what manner this clarity should take place. Certainly there seem to be different, as I say, nuances in relation. There have been suggestions that there be clearer guidelines, there have been suggestions that there be legislation. But my bottom line, Rachel, in all of this, and I'm sure the bottom line of everybody listening has been, spelled out very clearly there by Micheál Martin. Our first concern is that all women will always be entitled to whatever intervention they need to deal with any complication of their pregnancy, as I myself have availed of, and as is currently the practice in all maternity hospitals in Ireland.
And if that includes a termination, then so be it.
If that includes an early delivery, let's be really clear now, because people have different understandings of that particular word, termination. All pregnancies terminate. Mine all terminated with cesarean sections. 2 of them were interventions before term in order to deal with complications of pregnancy. And so if it involves and if it needs an early delivery, absolutely, that's what a woman should have.
Okay, but
so we
again,
want that to continue, and
just
it's very
to go back to the central issue here.
That there would, can I just say the final thing is, that's the first thing. There must always be any treatment needed by a woman. She must always be entitled to get and must always receive.
Okay.
The second thing is that every effort must be made always to preserve the life of the baby.
Again, just to go back to what we are being told is the central issue here, from a variety of reports on this issue, it would seem that this expert group is going to come down on the side of legislation combined with regulations. Would you oppose that?
I would like to see what exactly it is they're talking about. Micheál Martin has brought up the issue of suicide and the difficulty of dealing with that given its unpredictability. We in Ireland have a lot of experience in relation to that. I think many families listening to this programme who have experienced suicide within their family will know that it came as a surprise to most of them. It was something that they couldn't have predicted. We've seen terrible cases. I've seen some selective reporting in some of the Sunday papers about one particular study in the UK which indicates that abortion doesn't have an effect on a woman's suicidal ideation, but it does ignore 3 of the largest studies that have taken place within the last 12 months, particularly one which is a reanalysis of the biggest study ever done by Professor David Ferguson, who is pro-choice.
I don't have.
Who says? Will I just tell you what he actually says? What he says is that no matter what parameters you use or what outcome you look at, there is no doubt that there is a significant increase in suicidal ideation, in mental illness following abortion.
Okay.
And I think
but
our health service
as you know, others dispute that. I don't have the particular letter in front of me at the moment, but I know there was a letter from the Irish Times last week from a doctor who has worked in this area, and again he would dispute that. He would say that there is no such evidence. So I suppose that's one of those issues on which the debate would continue. Just finally, before we leave this, does the pro-life campaign, does it favour another referendum on this issue?
I think ultimately, if you want to deal with the suicide question properly and look at this carefully, you will have to go back there. And it seems to me, it's very disappointing to me, in fact, that the main internationally peer-reviewed studies are being ignored in the conversation that we've just had. I think, you know, one only has to remember the case of the artist Emma Beck, who hung herself after aborting her babies within the last couple of years, to know that it is a very serious issue. And a number of psychiatrists wrote in the Times this year, in fact, that medical services must take notice of the fact that a woman is at a significantly increased chance of serious mental illness following abortion.
All right. And just on that question again, you would favour another referendum, is that the case?
On what, Rachel, exactly?
Well, on the question of what the state should do in relation to abortion.
I think in relation to a referendum, if we want to go back and look at the next case and ensure that women will receive all treatments that they need in pregnancy and that the unborn life is not put at risk to whatever extent it can be preserved, we have a constitution that actually does already declare that. That situation has been made less clear by the Supreme Court decision in 1992, and it is generally acknowledged at this point that the Supreme Court didn't have the benefit of all of the medical evidence that we now have today. And so I think if we want to look at this question again as a culture, and if we want to look at, you know, the questions that are being brought up by other doctors, we will need to discuss this in a referendum. I think that's true. But I think our most immediate task now is to make sure that the services which women can expect and do get in Irish maternity hospitals do continue. And if it's necessary to make them more clear to some doctors in medical guidelines, well, then I think that's an appropriate thing to do. Legislation is a different kettle of fish. Legislation that doesn't go as far as X, in other words, that doesn't allow for abortion throughout the 9 months of pregnancy, might be held by a court in the future to be unconstitutional. And I don't think anybody wants that kind of thing enacted.
All right.
You know, nobody's looking for abortion through 9 months of pregnancy. So I think we would have to deal with that in a referendum.
Caroline Simons of the Pro-Life Campaign, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. It's almost 5:30.